the 9th chapter of the book of Tehillim, Lam Natsech Almut Labain Mizmor Lidavid. For the leader, Almut Lavan. What does this mean? There are those who try to say that means Almut means on the death of a ben, a son, which would be perhaps Avshalom, perhaps Amnon, perhaps the child that was born from the relationship, the illicit relationship between David and Bathsheba, and that died right at the beginning of his life. There are a number of children of David who were killed during the life of David, and so there are those who understand this chapter as reporting to that. Others obviously saying, as we've said many times, we don't know, and this could be some sort of musical instrument, but it seems more likely that it's referring to one of the death, unfortunately, of one of David's children. Continue verse 2. Oda Adonai b'chol libi, asapra kol niflotecha. I will praise you, God, with all of my heart. I will speak. I will enumerate all of your wonders. Not something that's easy to do if it's in response to the death of a child. People who, when their child dies, unfortunately, terrible, tragic thing. There are those who are angry at God, which makes a lot of sense. And there are those who say, thank you, God, for what I have received for you the years that I had with this child. Obviously, different people, different reactions, different situations. We're not here to judge the reactions, but interestingly, at least here, that is the way that this psalm begins. Esmecha ve'el tzavach azamra shimcha elyon. I will rejoice and exult in you. I will sing the hymns to your name, Elyon, the one who is high. Bishuv oivai achor, when my enemies retreated. Yikashlu v'yovdu mipanecha, they stumble to their doom at your presence. At least in these verses, doesn't seem like he's talking about the death of a child. My enemies retreated. What enemies retreated? If Avshalom is dead. If it's referring to the death of Amnon, who was killed by Avshalom, it's referring to the death of the child that was born to David and Bathsheba. So with the Avshalom, you could say, well, Avshalom and his rebels who rebelled against David, and David had to run away from Jerusalem. You could say in some way it refers to that. But of course, we know David cries, Avshalom, Avshalom, Beni, Beni, Avshalom. He cries over the death of Avshalom. He doesn't see him as his enemy, he sees him as his son. So sometimes difficult to understand. Verse 5, Ki asita mishpati v'dini yashavta lekisei shofet tzedek. For you uphold my right and claim your throne. You sit as a righteous judge. Ga'arta goyim ibadata rasha. You blast, you go air, you chide the nations. You destroy the wickedness. Shmama machita la'olam va'ed. You blot out their name forever. You see a phrase like blot out the name. Think of Amalek, Yemach Shemo, as we say about evil, right? These words, Shmam Machita, is like what we say after we mention the name of somebody evil. Let us blot out their names. Yemach Shemo is the phrase that's used, comes from this verse and other places. Ha'oyev tamu charavot la'netzach v'arim natashta avad zichram hema. The enemy is no more. Its ruins will last forever. That's what will be Netzach. What will be Netzach is the ruins, is the destruction. You've torn down their cities. Their very names are lost. There's right, it tells us in the Torah, coming back to this sort of Amalek and names, when Moshe says to Yoshua, right, Tov zod zikaron b'sefer v'sim ba'oznei Yoshua. God says, write this down in the book and place it into the ears. Tell it to Yoshua. That I will surely wipe away Amalek from the face of this earth. And of course, if God didn't tell Yoshua to remember that we had, tell Moshe to tell Yoshua to remember that we have to wipe out Amalek, Amalek would have long ago been forgotten. So the idea of wiping out the memories of the evil only destroys that evil if we remember that evil. Right? The evil will come again if we don't remember the evil. And so here, right, their names, right, their cities' names are lost, but their ruins are everlasting. We see the destruction. We know that this destruction happened to our enemies, to those who were wicked. But God will last forever. God's judgment, his throne set up for all time. It is God who judges the world with tzedek, with righteousness, with equity, with justice, correctly. That's the way he rules all of the people. It has to be with equity, yashar. V'hi Adonai miskav ladach, miskav li'itot batzara. God is a miskav, a haven for the oppressed, a haven during times of tzara, during times of sorrow and of trouble. Yiftechu v'cha yodei shemecha, ki lo azavta dorshecha Adonai. Verse that we say, it's the end of davening, of course. Those who know you trust you, God. If you know God, you trust in God's name. Why? Because God does not abandon those who seek out God. If you're in a relationship with God, if you're seeking out God, if you're trying to be an upstanding member of society, then God does not leave you behind. You may know this. I've heard it's true. Maybe Shmuel knows and can confirm it. But I've heard that Chabad does not say the verse at the end of Birkat Hamazon, the end of benching, Nar Hayiti v'gam zakanti v'lo ra'iti tzadik ne'ezov. That I was a child and I also got old, but I never saw throughout my life a righteous person who was left behind and who was abandoned in a sense by God. At least I heard that Chabad does not say this verse. Once, I don't know which Lubavitcher Rebbe it was that was imprisoned. Probably a lot of them were imprisoned, not because they did anything wrong, want that to be clear. And so they say, they don't say this. So this verse says a similar thing. It says, Kilo azavta dorshecha Hashem. Those who seek out God, God remains with them, even though sadly at times we know that has not always been the case. Continue verse 12. Zamru l'Adonai yoshev Tzion hagidu va'amim alei. So sing a song, those who dwell in Zion. Declare his deeds amongst the people. Let everybody know about the greatness of God. Ki doresh damim otam zachar lo shachach tzakat anavim. Another verse that we know that we say davening on Shabbat as part of the Av HaRachamim, the prayer that was composed in the aftermath of the Crusades and the killing of so many Jews in Europe by the Crusaders, that God does not ignore the cry of the afflicted, that God, avenges the bloodshed, that he's mindful of them, that we say, of course, sadly, noting the destruction and the death of so many innocent Jews during the Crusades. We're in verse 14, have mercy upon me, God. See the affliction of at the hands of my enemies and lift me up from the gates of death. Why? So then the gates of beautiful Zion, of beautiful Yerushalayim, I will be able to tell all of your praises, that I will be able to rejoice in your deliverance, in your saving of me. And so you see why these verses, why some of them can be understood as being Almut, Laven, that it could be referring to Avshalom, the death of Avshalom, that yes, at first David cries and whines and mourns. If you remember the story, his general Yoav comes to him and says, you better get up and tell the army, Yashikoach, thank you, we were victorious, because if they see that you're crying when they risk their lives to fight Avshalom and his rebels, you'll lose them forever. And so you can see that now David is on his way back after the defeat of Avshalom. He crosses the Jordan and goes back to Jerusalem. And this is the opportunity now that his enemies have been vanquished to thank God for keeping him alive, even though it was through the death of his son. So that's, makes sense how we would understand it in this way. Continuing verse 16, Tavu goyim bashachat asu, bereshet tamanu nilkda ragla. The nations sink in the pit that they have made. Their own foot is caught in the net they have hit, in a theme that we saw 2 chapters ago. The idea of, as we described it, it was sort of like Haman, who sets up the gallows for Mordechai and is hanged on them themselves. They fall into their own pits, my enemies. And so the same thing too, the nations sink in the pits that they have constructed for me to fall into. Noda Adonai mishpat asa befoel kapav nokesh rasha higayon sela. The Lord has made himself known. He works judgment. Wicked man is snared by his own devices. And then we say Higayon Sela, probably some sort of musical accompaniment. Are we switching now to a different part of the psalm? and therefore that Selah is saying that. Selah, as other people explained it, as being forever, that this is what happens when evil men, evil women make plots. Yashuvu Rishayim l'Shola Kol Goyim Shochei Elohim. Let the wicked be in Sheol. Sheol again, the afterlife, death. All of the nations who ignore God, let them all go to Sheol. Ki lo lenetzach yishkach evyon tikvat amiyim toved la'ad. Because it won't be that the needy are always ignored, that the hope of the afflicted will be lost forever, right? There'll be a time that they are gone, that the evil is in Sheol, that they're not seen anymore, that their cities are, as was said earlier, destroyed, that we only know about their names and their wickedness from their destruction. At a certain point, the righteous will inherit the earth, not the meek. Kuma, we're in verse 20. Adonai, al ya'oz enosh, shishpetu goyim al panecha. So stand up, rise up, God. Let not men have power. This would be the evil men with strength. Let the nations be judged in your presence, right? God, David has said over and over again in this chapter that God judges righteously, with equity, with correctly, with tzedek, with righteousness, and God's justice lasts forever, unlike these powerful nations who are evil. So God, get up and do it. Shita Adonai moralahem yedu gayim enosh hema Salah. Strike fear into them, God. Let the nations know that they are only men, as opposed to you, who is the Lord, who is in control of everything. And so here again, a chapter, David struggles, is it his personal struggles with Avshalom? As we've said many times, we'll say over and over again, Psalms written perhaps about episodes in David's life, but they were written for every man, every woman, everybody who goes through life. Nobody goes without struggles, whether it be whatever those struggles may be. We all go through them. At times we feel the world is unjust, the world is not right, the world is unfair. God, get rid of that unfairness, bring back equity, bring back justice, let my enemies be gone, and let your justice be seen. And then once again, like it said in the previous chapter, then God's name will be seen and will be great and will be understood that way throughout the world.